I want to move on now to catch up with the acting Premier of New South Wales, the Nationals leader, John Barilaro. Thanks for joining us, John, from the CBD studio there. I want to first get your thoughts about how Sydney-siders reacted to that horrible rampage yesterday.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chris. Look, I think yesterday, I said this earlier, it's going to be one of those moments in time that we'll remember. It'll leave an impression, a scar on this city in our history. But I think the thing that we take out of yesterday, heroes emerged out of what was a terrifying ordeal. And when you've got, citizens, bystanders, emergency service personnel who put their own well-being, their own lives at risk to protect the community, I think it really stands tall out of yesterday. Yes, it was frightening. Yes, it was something as a city has shaken us. But one of the things that has stand out is that Australian spirit where we rise to the occasion. And yesterday, we've got to acknowledge those heroes. And as Australians, we're very proud of them.
Yeah, I wouldn't downplay what they did for a minute. I think they're great heroes, and I'll ask you in a moment what you're going to do to recognise them. But I think one of the great insights it gives us is this is what we are. This is what people are around this country. On any given day, in 100 different places around this country, there will be blokes who step in to protect someone or to admonish someone for doing the wrong thing. It's in people's nature, and it's just great to see that reflected in such a dramatic and courageous way yesterday.
Yeah, I think you're right, Chris. It is something that I think as Australians we do. We always rise to the occasion. We stand for what we believe in. When we see an injustice happening, we rise. But it's very difficult to sit here today in the comfort of this studio and say that if that was me, I'd do the same. Instinct, adrenaline, all of that kicks in, and for some people, they rise to the occasion. Listening to those interviews yesterday with some of those young men, where they're saying, they've actually spoken about this over a beer, about what would you do if a terror attack or anything of this nature was to occur. I think those conversations are being had. I think we live in a different world. I think people are aware that anything can happen now in anywhere that you are in your day, at home or in a public place. And yesterday, like I said, we saw the best and worst of our country, but I'm going to focus on the best part of it. That they are those heroes that emerged.
Look, you're spot on, John, there in the fact that we'd all sit here and watch that and hope that we would be the one. We would like to think that we would have done what they did. Well, others didn't. They did. They were tested. They rose to the occasion. People from all walks of life, young, fit tradies, a fireman, a bloke, my age, who'd been working in an office, picks up a chair and takes on an incredible danger, draw attention to himself rather than others. So it is brilliant the way they rose to that occasion, as you say, in a way that we'd all like to think we would, but we will never know unless we're tested in a similar way. What will the state do? What forms of recognition are likely to be considered for these gentlemen?
Yeah, look, yesterday the Minister for Police, when we did our press conference, acknowledged that and said that we will be acknowledging these heroes. Also, the Commissioner Fuller has said something similar this morning. We'll go through that process, but one thing's for sure, they will be acknowledged for their bravery in the highest possible way. They should be. We'll do that as a government, but I'll leave that up to the Minister for Police and the Premier to work out exactly what that looks like going forward.
John, we don't know a lot about the motivations here. We know that the young bloke was yelling out Allah Akbar. We know there was some extremist material related to mass terrorist attacks on his body. We don't know whether there might have been some Islamist motivation or even the opposite, a white supremacist motivation. We don't know whether his mental health issues had just seen him seized onto some of this material. But the question I have then is this propaganda that we now know infiltrates our society largely through the digital world, whether it's white supremacy, whether it's Islamist extremism, there is a lot of this propaganda around, and we must be quite worried about the effect that can have on people. Even if they're not particular adherents to any strong ideology, they can be impacted by this stuff, especially if they're mentally vulnerable.
Yeah, look, with social media, the opportunity for people to capture things on their phones and upload them onto the net, I think as a society we're now exposed to more of this thing globally, not just what happens in our own backyard, but globally. And there will be people out there that look at it and somehow maybe something gets triggered in themselves and they see something that's glorified in doing something similar, the copycat sort of syndrome in a way. But, I don't want to alarm people that this was bigger than what it was yesterday. There is of course, documented over the last 24 hours that this individual had some mental health issues. This individual, of course, had a range of things happening in his life. I think what we've got to do is understand that there's an investigation. The government and every single government agency will play a role in of course, working with New South Wales Police with that investigation to understand what happened yesterday, the events of yesterday, more importantly, what led this young person to do what he did yesterday. So there's so much to really break down. We can all have a guess at the events, the information and the evidence is coming through, but I'll leave it up to the final response and report that comes from the investigation. I have all confidence in, of course, the Commissioner and the New South Wales Police to get a true picture of what actually occurred yesterday.
John Barilaro, as the acting Premier of New South Wales, I've got to ask you about this abortion debate. Should you and Gladys Berejiklian have been more upfront with the voters of New South Wales, the people of New South Wales, before the state election, knowing that Alex Greenwich was wanting to put up this private member's bill, knowing that you were perhaps going to accommodate him, just been upfront with people and told them you were going to deal with this issue of decriminalising abortion once and for all?
Yeah, look, Chris, I sort of get a little bit surprised with this narrative and this debate. As a local member, the member for Monero, I know in all my Meet the Candidates nights or debates that I've been in, and this is 3 elections, the pro-life, pro-choice question often gets asked, and that is of no surprise. It's become a usual question at a debate at a local level. There is no policy of government. There was no deal before the election in relation to this policy. I can assure you that.
Was there not an assurance with Alex Greenwich that you would accommodate him getting this bill up?
Absolutely not. No, to all my understanding, absolutely no. And you've got to understand that this particular bill and the work that was done behind it stemmed off the back of another bill that was put up by the Greens in the last term of government, the work that we did on safe access. And there was a working group that worked on, and part of that working group there was Trevor Khan, a member of the National Parties, Penny Sharp, a member of the Labor Party, Alex Greenwich was one of them, but Alex Greenwich has used his position as an independent to put forward a bill. We've got to respond to it. There will be criticisms that we did change standing orders to deal with it urgently and quickly, and that possibly is where the criticism is coming from. But on an issue of decriminalising, changing and pulling something out of the Crimes Act into the Health Act, that debate seems to be one that hasn't got as much angst about it. This wasn't really about do we have abortions or not in this state, because that actually happens each and every day today since the 70s. It was about how we deal with it in legislation. And look, I know the Premier's copping a lot of grief over it, but I'm the Deputy Premier, leader of the Nationals. I can assure you, to my complete understanding, there was no deal. This is, again, the government having to deal with the private members' bill, and we've chosen to deal in a particular way that I think has upset a few people.
And just finally, on another issue altogether, you've got the leaders of Tuvalu and Fiji, among others, bagging Australia over our coal industry, wanting us to effectively shut down our coal industry. What message do you have for those Pacific Island nations?
Well, again, Australia does its bit in relation to managing emissions. We're doing all we can in relation to the Paris Agreement, meeting our targets. What I won't accept as the Minister for Trade here in New South Wales, as well as the Minerals and Resource Minister, the Mining Minister, is being lectured to by the governments. I know what we do. All over the world, people rely on what is high-quality coal of Australia and New South Wales, and it's so important as an industry. We'll meet our obligations globally and nationally, but coal will be part of our future, our economy, both for generation and export. And as I said, I'm not going to be lectured to.